Our guest today is Yenny Wahid, a social entrepreneur, political activist, and former journalist who currently serves as the director of the Wahid Foundation in Indonesia. Her roots in politics go back generations, including her father, who served as the fourth president of Indonesia. While in Tokyo for the first Asia Statespersons Forum, organized by SPF's Asia and Middle East program, Ms. Wahid joined SPF World Views for a wide-ranging conversation about the challenges facing ASEAN and Indonesia, her work at the Wahid Foundation focusing on women's empowerment, as well as her thoughts on the future of her political career. I'd like to begin our conversation by discussing some regional issues and Indonesia's perspective and role in the region as well. So currently, as you know, Indonesia is chair of ASEAN for this year. With that in mind, how would you assess the current state of ASEAN as a whole?
I think ASEAN as a whole, of course, is going through a lot of change and also going through a challenging time. We are operating in a unstable world at this moment. Who would have thought, like maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that we would face a potential threat of a nuclear attack, like what is happening now? It feels like maybe 20 years ago, it felt like something that is quite impossible to happen. But then, now the threat is quite real. With what is happening in some parts of the world. ASEAN is operating under this kind of backdrop. So, of course, it poses a real challenge for us. And I think this is a time in which Asian centrality is very much needed. More efforts to create more centrality in our approach to deal with all these security threats and concerns. But having said that, each individual country that makes up ASEAN, some of them are facing their own internal challenges as well. So externally, some of our member countries are facing threats and facing disruptions caused by the geopolitical dynamics. But internally, some of the member states are also facing uncertainty and political disruptions as well. So that creates a big challenge for us to move forward as a group. So in that regards, I think Indonesia, as we are now enjoying a relatively stable political and economic progress, we feel that we need to step up and probably be more assertive in setting the tone for ASEAN in the future. And I think President Jokowi has done a good job in charting a role for Indonesia on the global map. The success of Indonesia when chairing the G20, I think, is seen as Indonesia's potential to put more color into many of the worldly engagements. Unfortunately, Indonesia has always been rather shy in asserting our position, in leading the pack, despite our stature and size in the region. But given the dire need of some sort of stability in the region, I think Indonesia needs to step up its role, in my opinion.
How would you like to see ASEAN strengthen its ability to work on joint initiatives and deal with these large challenges that are facing the region, as you pointed out?
Yeah. ASEAN countries need to find points of collaborations that we can build on and strengthen. For example, on the financial sector, now we're moving ahead with this project with the QR code that would ensure better and seamless transactions, financial transactions among Asian countries. I don't think ASEAN will go into the direction of European Union, for example, with one single currency, but at least I think a more seamless digital-based financial transaction will bring much more benefit to the region. The other thing that ASEAN needs to focus more, I think, is in the issue of cyber threat. our dependence on technology, of course, putting almost everyone at risk, individuals, organizations, countries, governments, all kinds of actors, state actors, non-state actors, all of them are at risk of cyber attacks. That's the challenge that we need to face together. And what do we do? What do we need to do to overcome these challenges together? This requires a long process because we need to create a standardized system as well that will make it much easier for better integration when it comes to adaptation of technology and overcoming the cyber threats. But we have to move towards the direction. I think by start talking as a collective to all these technology companies and have a more uniform voices when it comes to our response to these technology companies, then we will be better equipped to deal with the negative aftermath.
One other issue I wanted to touch on, the Indonesian government has made women's empowerment a central topic and a central agenda item for its time as chair of ASEAN, with a particular focus on women, peace, and security. And this is a topic that has been central to your work with the Wahid Foundation,
yes,
and also in connection with UN Women.
Yes.
So I'm hoping to hear about your expectations for what kind of advances could be made with this agenda, and what is the significance of WPS being brought up as a central agenda item for ASEAN?
Yeah. Of course, many more people, including policymakers, now realize that when we facilitate women, then the whole society will benefit from that. When we empower women, then it's not just women that will reap the benefit, but every community members, the nation even benefits from that. And if you restrict women, the impact on the society is quite fatal. When women are not being facilitated to be able to create a balanced life between work, a career, and family, then what happens is when women has to choose, then it will affect the whole society. One effect that societies like Japan or even Singapore are facing, for example, is the dwindling birth rate, because women are forced to make the choice between career and family. And you cannot blame women, for example, if they have to make if they make the choice of putting the career first. It's their own personal rights to choose whatever is the decision that will affect them for the rest of their lives, right? Whatever woman decides will have a big impact in the society. And the sooner we realize that, the better the society will be, and the better policymakers will come up with better policies to better accommodate women, to create a better support system to help women basically function in the societies where they don't have to choose between their rights, as an individual to express their full potential, but also sometimes the expected obligations for them to procreate. I think if you can facilitate women to be able to embrace these two at the same time, then it will have a big impact. So we came up with the program in the Wahid Foundation to create resilience in the community level that uses women empowerment as one of the pillars. The other three pillars are economic empowerment, and then training on peace building mechanism and conflict prevention, and also on tolerance building, stopping hatred in the community. And the fourth one is climate change issues. By facilitating women, by allowing them to express themselves financially, economically, and then also socially, and also sometimes politically, they found their voice. And they become a much more active members of the society and really create societal impacts on the community level. Because sometimes, policymakers, they forgot that even people at the bottom of the pyramid, they have power to create changes in themselves and in the society. So what we do is we just facilitate these people, especially women on the bottom of the pyramid, to find their voice, to find their potentials, to fulfill their potentials, to become a much more productive members of the societies.
Am I right in understanding you're talking about the Peace Villages?
The Peace Village Initiative, yeah.
Initiative.
This is the Peace Village Initiative is actually our initiative together with the UN Women. And I have to say, I'm very, very thankful to the government of Japan as well as the people of Japan, because they are partially funding this initiative. Some of the other funding comes from our own organizations, but Japan has been very, very instrumental in funding these activities as well.
This is a very important year. We're at the 50th anniversary of ASEAN-Japan friendship and cooperation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to ask you about your expectations or your thoughts about Japan and Japan's role looking to Japan ASEAN and Japan Indonesia as well.
Yeah.
First, how would you assess the state of Japan ASEAN relations right now?
Japan has always been a stable partner for ASEAN countries, especially for us, for Indonesians. Japan has always been there, being one of the biggest development partners in Indonesia through the foreign direct aid of Japan to Indonesia. I think the biggest donor to Indonesia is still Japan. Well, I think the relationship between the two countries are very, very strong, between the two leaders as well. I think when it comes to economic cooperations, we could be stronger. Japan could play a bigger role. I think Japan has always been a stable partner, but Japan, I think in terms of Indonesia, of course, we've got all this interest from other countries, and they're quicker in the process, and that's why it's more, in a way, it's more attractive. So we'd like for Japan basically to increase their engagement with Indonesia, in particular in the economic sector, and go out of the traditional sectors that Japan had invested, in telecommunication, infrastructure, and maybe go to other sectors that Japan has quite advantage of, and that could provide technology transfer, but could benefit with the two countries. One example of that is also in the issues of manpower. There is a shortage of manpower, of course, in Japan with the declining fertility rate. But in Indonesia, we've got abundance of people. We've got almost 300 million of people. And most of them, 60% of our populations, are young people, productive in the productive ages. So if we could find better ways to cooperate in this, better training the people of Indonesia, young people of Indonesia, to help fill up the opportunities, in workforce in Japan, then that could be a win-win situation for both countries, for example. When it comes to security issues, regional security issues, I think Japan plays a big role, especially given that Japan is a member of the Quad. And for us in Indonesia, given our geographical locations, we are in the middle, between all these Quad countries. Japan, Australia, India, we are on that path of any activities that could happen, Taiwan Straits, China, and all that. So we actually look for Japan also to provide a probably much clearer stance when it comes to engagement on security issues. I'm talking in particular to the Taiwan Straits, the issues of Taiwan Straits. So if anything happened there, of course, it could disrupt the whole supply chain in the world, and it could just disrupt the whole economy of the world. And so we're looking for Japan basically to be more active, to give a firmer stance, because in the absence of a clear stance from the United States on these issues, we have to look to other players in the regions to provide a better understanding of their positions, and whether that would create a deterrence for any major player to make a move that could tip the balance of security in the region. And we see Japan as one of those players.
I also want to shift our conversation a little bit to the reason why you're in Japan right now, which is because of the Asia Statespersons Forum. So this is being held by the Asia and Middle East program at SPF. This program welcomes leaders from around the region to come to Japan to meet and discuss shared challenges, build connections, and kind of share ideas, provide a forum for people such as yourself to come and discuss these shared issues. Could you tell us a bit about your experience at this event so far?
I just want to say, first of all, how much I appreciate being invited to join the first Statespersons Forum of SPF in Tokyo. And it's such a big honor for me to join this program. I found it tremendously helpful in terms of a connection with other leaders in the ASEAN countries, especially the young leaders. And I think this will create better integrations of policies in the future in our respective countries. And for me personally, to be able to reconnect with some of the players and to have in a way, a closed door, off the record discussions on sensitive issues, I think is extremely, extremely invaluable. Second thing is that for me personally also to connect with people some of us are children of more established politicians in the past eras. So to connect with all these other political families as well, I think it's wonderful, and to learn from each other, and to learn and to strengthen each other's spirits, basically, because politics is a marathon. You're in there for the long haul, and sometimes when you're down, when you are in between jobs, basically, it could get your spirit down. But then meeting people who are in similar predicament, and then making a comeback again later, I think that's also a very good moral boost. And learning from them, their mistakes, learning from our mistakes and our success stories, I think is also very beneficial.
And you also are participating in this forum, of course, because you are a prominent leader in Indonesia. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your vision for the future of where that will take you. What do you see as your future path as a leader in Indonesia?
I have always been involved in politics because my family is a political family. My great-grandfather founded the largest Muslim organizations in Indonesia with around 100 millions of grassroots followers that is quite influential in the political landscape, in the socio-political landscape of Indonesia. My grandfather was the chairman of the organization. Before he served as a minister in the first cabinet after independence. My father also served as a chairman of the organization before he was elected president. The progression for me personally to carry the banner, the political banner, is already laid out. It's not something that I could avoid. Someone has to take up the obligation in a way. I do feel it is an obligation for me. It is not just a choice, but I do feel that the political banner of the family needs to be upheld, because with it comes a transfer of values that we hope will be instilled in the society. So of course our family is known for our belief in the values of tolerance, of protection of minority rights, of equality, of social justice, of protecting the poor. So through political involvement, we could make sure that governments will adopt these kind of values as the base of their policies in the future. I think every politician, the momentum is there and the opportunity is there, will have to say yes to the opportunity to lead the country in any role at all. For me, I would say that I have to prepare myself if the opportunity comes, but I also still try to contribute to the society in whatever role that I play, even outside of the system. So inside or outside, I will still try to contribute to the country. That's just the calling.
That was our conversation with Yenny Wahid, director of the Wahid Foundation. We're hard at work on new episodes of SPF World Views, so don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.